Then we will now go to the next question, which says sketch the inverse in your answer book, indicate all intercept with the axis and the coordinates of one other point on your sketch. And then the next question says sketch the graph of the inverse in your answer book, indicate all intercept with the axis and the coordinates of one point on your sketch. So we're doing this, the third one, we've just finished with that. So please remember the inverse, the equation of the inverse was actually y is equals to x squared over 27, and we said our x must be less than 0. So our x is equals to less than 0. So we've answered that with the restriction that side. So let's move it just a bit. I'm going to draw the line y is equals to x. It will be at 45 degrees. Let me just draw it a bit here. Have a pen, have to draw a line. Good. Good, that's our line. And then I will draw the inverse so that you can see it. Remember, x must be less than 0, so that it will be the side. Remember how we answered the question before. We said if you want to see it much simpler, look at the curve, how the curve is drawn from the original function of f. And if you look, the curve is between your x, a positive x-axis, so it's going to be between the positive y-axis and your negative y-axis. And this will be now swapped because x becomes y, y becomes x. So this will be our negative x. This will be our negative x this side and our positive y this side. So our graph is going to be there. When you look at the initial curve is curving away from the negative x-axis. Do you see that? So it means the inverse must be true. If initially it was curving away, let me just write it away from the negative y-axis, it means the only thing that changes will be y in the inverse. So for the inverse, it will have to be away from the negative x-axis, because x becomes y, y becomes x. So I'm expecting it to curve away from the negative x-axis. So I'm expecting to, let me just erase this. Okay. So I'm expecting it to curve away. I'm having a curve of that line. And then it will just be simple for you. So that's our graph. And then this will be our x and our y intercept. And we need another point. So because we only know point P, which is the only point that we know, point P, we'll try to draw point P this side, the image of point P. Then we can say your y, your x is actually -9 and your y is actually 3. Alright, let me just so that it can also be visible for everybody. So the image will just be x. We swap them, y, x becomes 9 and this will become 3 because it changed. So P was actually point x was 3, y was -9, and then its image will now swap -9 and 3, and it's true. So it shows that our graph is actually true. And then we can also squeeze in the last question to say, describe the transformation of f to g if g of x equals to the square root of 27x. That's a very, very simple question. And let me just move but and tala. So it's for x, and then we have f at x, which is the same as your graph of f was y equals to negative square root of 27x, and your graph of g, let me just write g of x, is actually square root of 27x. And then we say our x must actually be positive. X must be greater than 0. Let's move in. X must be positive. X must be greater than 0. Good. If you compare the two, what actually changes the sign? So what happened? X remains the way it is. X is still the same. We still have x as being the same, except y. So y, the value of y, the sign of y actually changed the sign. So what happened? What kind of transformation is that? It means if you had a point, for example, which was here, it means that that point has actually came this side. Good. No. Let's correct that, because the y value is the one that's changing. So that point will be this side. So it was a positive, now it's negative. So if this was negative, it now become positive. If that was positive, it will now become negative. So if you can look at this clearly, it means your axis actually was chopped. So this is just a reflection across the x-axis. Because what actually changes just y. So it moved from one, it was positive and it's now negative. Remember, these are the positive. I hope you get it.